They say history is written by the victors, but what about the chapters that were never meant to be read at all? In a forgotten attic, a man uncovers a map sealed under the crest of a Russian Tsar, but the coastline it marks isn't in Russia. It's deep in America, decades before any official explorers arrived. And at the end of that trail? A vault hidden by the mountains, guarded by an oath older than any empire. What did they find here 200 years ago? Why was it sealed away, and who else has been waiting for someone foolish enough to open it? Title: The Lost Russian Vault Map to the Native Treasure. The rain came down in fine silver needles that night, tapping on the rusted roof of a farmhouse deep in the forgotten corner of Alaska. Inside, where the air smelled faintly of pine resin and old leather, Thomas Beckett lit the final candle on the workbench. His hands, calloused and lined with age, brushed away a layer of dust from the old trunk before him. It was his late grandfather's chest, untouched for decades, sealed with a brass lock that had turned almost black with time. The moment the lock snapped open, the faint scent of musk and old paper escaped, carrying with it something far heavier than dust: history. Inside lay neatly stacked letters tied in twine, a few faded photographs of stern-looking men in winter uniforms, and beneath them, a rolled parchment, bound by a strip of cracked leather. The edges of the paper were brittle, almost ready to crumble, yet the ink, deep crimson, seemed to whisper of a secret long kept. Thomas unrolled it carefully, the candlelight revealing strange Cyrillic script, ornate compass roses, and a coastline that, curiously, was not Russia at all, but the Pacific Northwest of America. A small inscription, scrawled in faded ink at the bottom, read in English: "For the one who dares follow, know this, the vault is guarded not by men, but by the earth's oldest oath." The handwriting was unfamiliar. But the seal at the corner, a two-headed eagle with a crown, was unmistakable. Why would a Tsar's map be here? Thomas whispered to himself. He took out his phone and sent a photo to his oldest friend, Michael Trent, a former museum curator turned private researcher. Within minutes, a message pinged back. "Thomas, this is from the reign of Alexander I. And the coordinates, they're not supposed to exist. The gathering." By morning, Thomas had called in the rest of their small but seasoned circle. Z. Carver, an expert in Indigenous American history, quick-witted and fearless. Gunther "Gun" Holtz, an ex-military survivalist who claimed he could navigate blindfolded through any forest. Elena Markov, a linguist whose great-grandfather had served under the last Tsar. When the map was laid out before them, the room fell silent. Elena traced her gloved finger over the curling ink. "This," she breathed, "is not just a route. These markings, these are not Russian military symbols. They're a blend. Russian cartography mixed with native tribal markings from the Columbia Plateau region. Do you realize what this means?" Michael leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "It means," he said, "that someone, possibly Russian explorers, were here, deep inland, before Lewis and Clark even set foot in these territories. But the real question is," he looked at Thomas, "what did they find worth hiding? The first omen." 3 days later, under a sky streaked with pale gold clouds, they set off in a rugged van filled with gear. The map led them toward the Cascade Mountains. But as the winding roads gave way to rough trails, an unease began to take root. In a small roadside diner, an old man with braids streaked in silver noticed the rolled parchment sticking out of Thomas's bag. His eyes widened, and without a word, he shuffled over. "You carry something that belongs to the earth," he said, voice deep and steady. "Some things are not found, they find you. But remember this, when the cedar burns without wind, turn back." Before they could ask him anything, he walked away into the rain. Gunn scoffed. "Locals love their ghost stories." But Z's eyes narrowed. That wasn't a story. That was a warning. The hidden mark. The next morning, after hours of hiking through dense forest, they reached a clearing where the air felt heavier, as though time itself slowed. In the center stood a weathered totem pole, its carvings worn but still fierce, eagles, wolves, and a spiral pattern that matched one on the Russian map. Elena took out a small rubbing kit, carefully tracing the spiral. Under the faint shadow of the design, she spotted something that made her pause. "There's another layer," she said. "An inscription, but it's in Old Russian, and it's almost deliberately obscured." When she deciphered it, her voice trembled. "The ones who came first found the vault." But the vault was not empty, it was alive. "What does that mean?" Gunn asked. Michael looked up at the sky, uneasy. "It means," he said, "we're walking into something they feared enough to hide, for 2 centuries. The seal in stone." By the end of the day, they reached the base of a moss-covered cliff where a narrow stream trickled down into a small basin. The map's markings placed them exactly here. Thomas scanned the cliff until his eyes caught an odd shape, a stone slab, almost perfectly square, set into the wall. Across its surface was the same 2-headed eagle from the map, carved deep into the rock. Beneath it, faintly visible, was the spiral again. The slab was cold to the touch, even in the late afternoon sun. And then, the wind shifted. From somewhere inside the cliff came a sound, a low, resonant hum, like the echo of a drum struck in some vast, unseen chamber. Z stepped back. "That's not the wind. That's something, inside." The first question. As the candlelight from their camp flickered in the shadows, Michael broke the silence. "If the Russians really did make it here, and if they recorded this place with the help, or the resistance, of the tribes who lived here, then there's something both sides wanted to keep hidden. The Tsar wouldn't waste resources on an expedition just for gold or furs. So what was worth bringing across an ocean, carrying through the wilds, and sealing behind a carved stone?" Thomas stared into the fire. "Maybe the better question is, what's still in there, waiting?" And in that moment, the rain began again, not a gentle drizzle, but a sudden, furious downpour, as if the mountain itself had heard the question. The storm did not pass quickly. It raged through the night as if the sky itself wished to wash them from the mountainside, and when dawn came, it was not with warmth but with a pale, sullen light that turned the forest into a landscape of dripping shadows and whispering leaves. The stone slab in the cliff face glistened with rain, its carved eagle looking less like a heraldic emblem and more like a sentinel, watching them with silent judgment. Thomas approached it again, his fingers brushing over the deep grooves of the spiral below the eagle. The cold of the rock seemed to pull the heat from his skin, and for a moment, he swore he felt a faint vibration, as though something deep inside was aware of his touch. "Michael," he called quietly, "come feel this. Tell me I'm not losing my mind." Michael pressed his palm against the slab, then pulled back abruptly. "That's not just stone, it's like the cliff has a heartbeat. An echo from the past." They set up a makeshift tarp to keep the rain from flooding their equipment while Elena knelt by the base of the slab, carefully brushing away mud and moss. She found a small depression, almost like the keyhole to a lock, but shaped not for a key, rather for something circular. The edges bore tiny markings that looked like waves, and above it, barely visible, were the faint remnants of paint in a color so faded it was almost silver. Z examined it closely. "These are coastal patterns." "My guess? This wasn't made by the Russians. They might have used it, but this is older. Much older." Gunn, who had been pacing impatiently, stopped. "If it's a lock, then where's the key?" Elena straightened slowly, her eyes drifting to the map. "Maybe, the key isn't an object. Maybe it's an event. Something that has to happen here to open it. The first sign." Late that afternoon, while they scouted the area, Thomas spotted an unusual cedar tree not far from the cliff. Its trunk was hollowed and charred on the inside, yet no recent fire had touched it. A ring of smooth river stones surrounded it, and when the wind shifted, a faint curl of smoke rose from within, even though the air was still and the sky above was clear. Z froze when she saw it. "The old man at the diner, remember what he said? When the cedar burns without wind, turn back. Michael looked between the tree and the cliff. Or maybe, he said slowly, it means we're in the right place. They gathered around the cedar as the faint smoke thickened, carrying a strange, resinous scent that made the air feel heavier in their lungs. Gunn stepped inside the circle of stones, then reached into the hollow. His hand closed on something cold, smooth metal, circular, no bigger than a pocket watch. When he pulled it out, the object gleamed dully in the fading light. It was a medallion, engraved with the spiral symbol. Around its edge ran a series of alternating symbols, half Cyrillic, half unfamiliar geometric designs. Unlocking the slab. With the medallion in hand, Elena approached the depression at the base of the slab and fitted into place. It slid in perfectly, as though it had waited 2 centuries for this moment. There was no dramatic grinding of stone, no shifting of earth, only a deep, low hum that seemed to come from far within the mountain, resonating through their bones. The spiral beneath the eagle began to glow faintly, not with any visible light, but with a strange radiance that made the edges sharper to the eye. And then, almost imperceptibly, the slab began to move inward, as if drawn by unseen hands. Cold air rushed out from the darkness beyond, carrying the smell of wet stone and something else, something faintly metallic. Z's voice was a whisper. It's open. The passage. The opening revealed a narrow corridor, carved into the rock but smoothed by some long-forgotten technique. The walls bore carvings in 2 distinct styles, on one side, the intricate double-headed eagle motifs and Russian script, on the other, swirling shapes and animal figures of native design. Between them, in the center of the passage, ran a shallow groove in the floor filled with water that reflected their torchlight like a thin silver thread. As they stepped inside, the hum from before grew slightly louder, almost as if acknowledging their presence. The air was cold enough to make their breath mist, yet the walls felt faintly warm under their touch. Michael ran his fingers over one of the Russian inscriptions and frowned. This isn't just a record of who was here. It's a warning, it says, the vault keeps what it is given and takes what is owed. Gunn muttered under his breath. Whatever that means, I don't like it. The Chamber of the Masks. After a slow descent, the passage opened into a cavernous chamber lit by shafts of light filtering through cracks high above. At the far end stood a semicircle of carved stone figures, half wearing the stern expressions of Russian noblemen, half the animalistic visages of tribal spirits. All of them wore masks, each unique, each unsettling in its own way. In the center of the chamber sat a stone pedestal. Upon it rested a chest bound in iron bands, its lock shaped like a snarling wolf. Z approached one of the masks and noticed something strange. Each had a single hole where the right eye should be, and through that hole, the light from above focused into a single point on the floor. When all 5 points of light were traced together, they formed the spiral again. Elena's voice echoed softly through the chamber. This symbol, it's more than a mark. It's a map within a map. The unwelcome presence. Just as they began to examine the chest, the faint sound of footsteps echoed from the passage behind them. Gunn's head snapped up, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt. From the shadows emerged 3 figures, 2 men and a woman, dressed in weatherproof gear, their faces obscured by scarves and goggles. One of them carried a modern satellite scanner, its display casting a green glow across his mask. The lead figure stepped forward and spoke in a voice calm but edged with authority. You've done the hard part for us. Now step away from the chest. Thomas's pulse quickened. And if we don't? The figure tilted his head slightly. Then you'll learn exactly what the Tsar's explorers learned, and why they never returned. The question that hung in the air. For a moment, no one moved. The chamber was silent except for the steady drip of water from the cavern roof. Thomas looked at the chest, then at the intruders, then at his friends. Tell me, he said, his voice steady but low, do you even know what's inside? Do you know why this place was sealed for 200 years? The lead figure's eyes, barely visible above his scarf, gleamed. Oh, we know. The question is, can you live with it once you've seen it? The silence in the chamber stretched until it felt as though the very air might shatter under the weight of it. The masked intruders didn't move closer, nor did they lower their guarded stance. They simply waited, confident that their presence alone would force a decision. Thomas's mind raced, but his instincts told him something deeper than danger was at play here, something that made the stranger's confidence seem less like arrogance and more like inevitability. Z's eyes never left the lead figure. You talk like you've been here before. The man's voice was calm, measured. Not here. But we've followed the same trail through archives, whispered accounts, and disappearances. We know the vault doesn't give freely. It tests. Michael's grip on his torch tightened. Tests. The woman in the group spoke for the first time, her accent faint but sharp. Every party that has entered since the original expedition, native or Russian, has been given a choice. Most never made it to the point of choosing. The opening of the chest. Ignoring their words for the moment, Thomas stepped toward the chest in the center of the chamber. The carved wolf's head on the lock seemed almost alive in the dim light, its teeth catching the glow of the torches like polished bone. Elena examined it closely and found a small, concealed mechanism at the base. Without a word, she took the medallion they had used to open the slab and pressed it against the wolf's forehead. A metallic click echoed through the cavern. The iron bands loosened, curling back with a sound like deep exhalations. The chest's lid rose slightly, and from within came a faint pulse of light, not bright, but steady, as though whatever lay inside had its own heartbeat. Gunn's voice was low. That's not gold. The contents. When the lid was pushed fully open, they saw it, not coins, not jewels, but a collection of objects unlike anything they had expected. At the center lay a large, polished stone disc, no thicker than a man's hand but wide enough to span the chest. Its surface was engraved with both Russian script and native glyphs, intertwined so seamlessly that the two languages became one. The disc shimmered faintly, as though reflecting light from a sun they could not see. Surrounding it were smaller items, beads carved from minerals that no one could name, a dagger with a handle made of antler wrapped in silver wire, and a rolled parchment sealed with resin. Michael carefully lifted the parchment and broke the seal. Inside was writing, dense, flowing Cyrillic, with marginal notes in a different hand, in English. He began to read aloud. We came in search of land, but found something that belonged not to us, nor to those who guided us. A covenant older than the mountains, made when the earth was young. We were warned, take nothing, or the oath will bind you. The oath. The lead intruder stepped forward slowly now, his voice softer, almost reverent. This is the oath of the vault. The disc is more than an artifact, it is a key to something else, somewhere else. The tribes who guarded it say it holds the memory of the earth's first stories, stories that shaped the land itself. The Tsar's men wanted to take it. Most never returned from the attempt. Z's brows drew together. And you? What do you want with it? The man's gaze shifted briefly to his companions. To ensure it does not fall into hands that see only profit. Gunn snorted. And we're supposed to believe you're the good guys? The woman replied without hesitation. Good and bad aren't part of this. There's only the oath, and the cost of breaking it. The chambers shift. Without warning, the hum that had followed them since the slab opened deepened into a low, resonant rumble. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The spiral pattern on the floor beneath the pedestal began to glow faintly, and the groove of water around it rippled in a perfect circle. Elena stumbled back. It's reacting to us. To the choice we're about to make. Michael glanced at Thomas. If the Tsar's men were telling the truth, taking the disc means more than moving an object. It means changing something. The lead intruder's voice cut in sharply. You touch it, you own whatever happens next. If the oath binds to you, it binds for life. The decision. Thomas looked around the chamber, the masks on the walls, the wolf-shaped lock now lying open, the strange light pulsing from the disc. Every part of him wanted to lift it, to feel the weight of history in his hands. But in his gut, he remembered the old man's words in the diner, and the cedar tree that had burned without wind. Some things are not found, they find you. He reached forward, then stopped just short of the disc. Slowly, he placed the medallion on top of it, aligning the spiral with the engraved markings. The rumble ceased. The glow dimmed. The air felt lighter, as though a great weight had lifted. Thomas stepped back. It stays here. The mountains answer. The intruders exchanged glances, then one by one lowered their guard. The lead man gave the faintest nod. Then you have passed the test. Without another word, they turned and left the way they had come, their footsteps fading into the passage. When the group followed them minutes later, they found the stone slab had sealed itself again, the spiral faintly visible but the medallion gone, vanished as if it had never existed. Z broke the silence as they stood under the gray mountain sky. So what now? We just leave? Pretend none of this happened? Thomas looked back at the cliff. No. We remember. And we make sure no one else tries to break the oath. The final question. Weeks later, back in the farmhouse, Thomas unrolled the original map once more. The coordinates still pointed to the same place in the Cascades, the same spiral marking. Yet now, along the bottom edge of the map, there was a new line of script, one he swore had not been there before. It was in English, written in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. The earth remembers those who choose silence. But the silence will not last forever. He sat back, staring at the words. Was it a warning, or an invitation? And somewhere in the distance, carried on the wind through the pines, he thought he heard it again, the faint hum, steady, patient, as though the vault was still waiting.